Well, this is the last of our conversations here. Um, I'm going to talk. I think I said last time that I was going to talk about Jesus, because you'd think after 2,000 years in the church's life that we would have worked out who Jesus is. But there's still a lot of issues that are up for debate tonight, and we'll have a bit of a look at that. But I'm going, and welcome to everyone who's not there. But Ross is on the phone. Hello, Ross, and those other blokes, right? Well, look, I'm just going to try briefly. Get down to business. Almighty God, we thank you for your promise of that you are here with us as we ponder these very large issues. Great for our understanding, our sense of who you are in this life. So be with us, we pray, in our conversation. And yes, amen. All right, so I said that it's all here in John, the first verses of John's Gospel, the prologue. Now, if you cast your mind back to the way the other Gospels start, Mark, which is just for shows, it just begins saying, this is the story about Jesus, and here we go. Matthew starts with this elaborate genealogy, which relates Jesus all the way back to Abraham. So Matthew is very intent on locating Jesus within the historical context of the Jewish people and their role as the bearers of revelation and eventually the Messiah. Luke, who's not a Jew, he's not so interested in the relationship to Abraham. Luke's got a genealogy for Jesus that goes right back to Adam. So he is saying Jesus, in a sense, is the representative man for the entire race of humanity, because he's related right back. John is very different. He's writing this probably when he's in his 90s. Very old, anyway, we know that. We also know that he's probably the last of the disciples still alive, apostle. And he's also writes in a different way than the others. His Greek is educated Greek. It's high quality, high caste Greek. When I was studying theology, every year the Greek exam would be on one particular section of the New Testament, and in my time there, the emphasis was on the Johannine literature. That's all the stuff written by John. And so, in fact, I ended up winning the prize, and the state prize for Greek. I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the complexity of his language, and we'll start to see the way he uses language. It's astonishing, and the fact that he has a very clear intention when he writes his gospel, and we'll see why he's writing it in this prologue as well. So it begins like well, let me read it through. In the beginning was the Word. That's the first time and the only time that Jesus is referred to as the Word. And that has preoccupied scholars ever since. What does it mean? And it's John who uses this word. And he's had a lot of time to think about it. You hear him at the end of this prologue saying, and I was there. What an astonishing picture. Oh, I was there. I saw it. I touched you. I was there. This is, and so when he uses this word, the logos, he's using a word that was translated, was used in the Septuagint. The Septuagint is a translation. It's the first translation of the Old Testament from Hebrew into Latin. And a bunch of scholars in Alexandria. Alexandria was the pretty much the intellectual capital of the world. Athens was living on its reputation, had been for generations. Still a great place. But Alexandria had the library, and around the library were living quarters for up to 30 scholars who were to go and stay there. They reckon the Alexandrian Library had 700,000 scrolls. That's huge. The first million unit library in Australia was, I think, the Sydney University Library, and got to there in about 1950, I think. So, and a huge library. So, in the centre of great scholarship. Now, there were a group of, and very Jewish too, by the way. There was, the Jews were probably in a majority in the city around there, because they were the relics of the people who didn't go on the exile. There was a big Jewish population. Up to 3 or 4 of the sections of the city were Jewish sections out of 5 sections. So these scholars had got together to do a translation of the Old Testament in order to communicate with the Latin-speaking world of the Roman Empire. And they used the word logos to mean, and logos was a sort of a Greek word, well known. They used that to mean the words coming from God's mouth. Right? So when the prophets in the Old Testament say, this is the word of God, they'd say this is the logos of God. They would use the word simply in that way. But there are other uses which we will come to. So let me read on. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, his name is John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. And this is why he's written his book. You know, he said he was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him, did not recognize him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or the will of the flesh or the will of a man, but of God. And the word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory. The glory is of the Father's only Son. So, back to this. In the beginning was the word. Okay. So, the only time this is used is pretty much in John. John is there. So we've got to ask ourselves, why did he choose to say Jesus is the word? It's clear he's talking about Jesus because later on he identified. He called it him him, and then we saw it, blah, blah. He's talking about it. So the other way this word was used was in Platonic philosophy. Um, now, they used the word logos, but what they meant by that was that they saw the Platonist philosophers, they saw order in the cosmos, which is a very good thing to see, because a lot of people don't see order. They think the cosmos is chaotic and sort of hostile. The Platonists saw this wonderful order, and they concluded that there must be a mind, some organizing principle behind the cosmos. Otherwise, it wouldn't have this pattern as wonderful for repetition and complexity. It'd be, it'd be everywhere, like Brownian motion. You know? So they concluded that behind the creation, there must be some ordering principle, and they called that the logos. Uh, and that became identified in some philosophies with an actual figure called the demiurge. And the demiurge was the one that had the dealings with grace and making stuff. God was beyond that. But so so I think that idea is hovering around in John's mind also when he says, in the beginning was the word. So we've got two meanings. One that is simply mean, he could be saying, in the beginning, God spoke. That would be the first story. Or he could be saying, in the beginning, there was order. There was a creative mind. Now, more recently, some of the feminist theologians have identified the word logos with the Greek word sophia. Sophisticated comes from it. It means wisdom, knowledge, smarts. So, yeah, uh, and yeah, they say that there are parallels with this use of the word, and so some feminist theologians have wanted to sort of translate that by saying, in the beginning was wisdom, knowledge. I think it's too forced. I don't think. Look, the word Sophia, if they wanted to say that, they would have used the word Sophia. It was available, in a commonplace.
That's not a season Japanese.
Where does it come out?
Well, he identifies them as slightly different.
Yeah.
And of course, all centered on God.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I see. The thing about John is that we're Latinists in our mind. We want precision. I want a singular answer to the question, what does that word mean? But John doesn't. I think sometimes he uses all men, or he'll allow all the men to sit in a word and enrich with a word. So I think what John is doing is trying to find a way of explaining to the world who, in fact, Jesus is. It was a very difficult ask, especially if you're talking to your Jewish brothers and sisters. They had a lot of trouble getting around the idea that God wasn't just one. If Jesus is God, well, what are you doing about the entire Old Testament? That's hard work. And for the Greeks and the Latinists, they would say, what is God doing being in the world? It's ridiculous. It is a philosophical contradiction. Yes. Yeah, but they didn't have this concept of a singular beyond. They elevated Zeus as a king, but I mean, this is a pretty despicable character. Married, what, at 7 wives, one of them was his sister. Uh, and then he used to impersonate blokes and get into bed with their wives at night. Well, you laugh, but this is the whole issue behind Hercules. That's right, because Zeus was his father, and Zeus had raped the wife of a god by impersonating, and and Zeus's wife at the time, Hera, was consumed with hatred for the child, and she was the one that plagued his life. And, when he was a young man, he'd married and had kids. She got him mad, and he threw his wife and kids into the fire.
It's the same.
But,
That wasn't considered by John as the same, even though there was a tradition in Greek thinking that
yes,
they would be made flesh through these unearthly unions.
yes,
They were
yes.
comfortable with that.
Yeah, but it was ambiguous to see that the fact that the gods were dabbling in the world was a measure of their smallness, really. So there were multiple gods. You would have a god for this, a god for that. If your wife was pregnant, you go under this god. You know, if you had a big business deal, you go on through this god. Quick sacrifice. Yeah, very good. And you have family gods, you know. This god is really our family god, you know. And the dad, they have this god, so we'll have it. And it was a very fearful relationship you had with gods because they could turn nasty on you. You wouldn't know. The whole Oedipus trilogy, Oedipus at Colonus, Oedipus Rex, and all that. What hovers behind that is the fact that there was a plague in the city, and no one knew why, except they thought, well the gods we'd obviously done something wrong because there was this terrible plague. And when Oedipus turns up, it coincides with the plague stopping. So they thought, oh, hey, it's because of him and he's elevated. So, but that's a very messy relationship.
It's why you say John had a big sell because they'd spent centuries fighting against multiple gods.
That's right.
And then suddenly they go, hang on, there's two. There's two of them.
That's right.
That'd be really tough.
Well, you see it reflected in the New Testament letters. The Corinthians, for example, they were having trouble. They said, "Oh, we believe in Jesus, but Jesus is not equal. He's up there, he's part of God, and so on." And that fight is still on. I mean, I know fellow ministers who still struggle today, believing that Jesus was God.
I believe Jesus was God. I believe Jesus was God's son.
Yeah,
He's
I
not
know.
brother. He's
Yeah.
not God.
See,
I have a big problem. I have a really big problem with that. A really big problem.
well, that's the same problem we're dealing with. So. But in a way, I think what John is doing is it's a type of apologetic. He is using the language of Greek philosophy to go as far along the track he can with them to say, look, this is what the law really is. And the rest of the book, John chooses a series of miracles to display this. He doesn't use the word miracle. He calls them signs. They're pointing forward to life, really. And he chooses it very carefully to show how Jesus is who he said he is in this beginning. He is the Word. You're seeing coming storms, turning water into damn good wine. Imagine that's his first. It's like a trick. It's weird. John has such a nasty view of the logos, and the first thing he does is turn water into wine, and it's very interesting. And then you see him stepping through.
Speaking 5,000 this morning.
Yeah.
He's very good at mathematics.
So you're skeptic. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Right. 3,000 people, 5,000 people.
Food left over that you could see, you could actually physically.
Yeah,
That was a good trick.
yeah, I mean, look, this is an issue, really. I mean, people do have trouble with these stories, of course. And John, right at the end of his book, says, look, I could fill libraries of the other stuff he's done, but I've just chosen these. Just so you will believe that he is who he says he is below that. So, the opening words, in the beginning, what does that remind you of? So it's Genesis in the beginning. And he's done that on purpose. He's really ringing the bell. This goes right back to there. This is the God who in the beginning made the heavens and the earth. So he says, it says the word was with God, and the word was God. That last word was God is greatly debated because there is no preposition. And there is a translation of the New Testament which has that written. And he was with God, and the word was God. There's a translation. Was a God, which would suit you better. And that's the JW translation. The Jehovah's Witness Bible is their own translation. And if you want to see if it's a Jehovah's Witness, go to the first verse of John's Gospel and see if there's an A in because they believe that they are what theologians call modalists. They believe that God is in three modes. So you've got one God who shows his face as Jesus and shows his face as the Holy Spirit and as God the Father. But it's one God with three aspects. So that's so, and then there's tritheism. Who just say there's three gods that really close together. There's three gods. Now both of those are heresies. We stand in the middle and say no, but they're one. Until you go crazy. Really. But that's what we believe it's born in upon us by sheer necessity that we've got to hold these things in tension, as it were. So John is taking us right back to the beginning of creation itself. That's I mean, Matthew and Mark have got genealogies. John's putting in at the cosmic level, as it were. This is the big word. And the word was with God, and the word was God. He was in the beginning with God. What he's trying to say then is that the Logos existed before the creation of the cosmos. It's a pre-existent. This is not Jesus at this stage. Jesus, he comes as Jesus into the world, but the Logos has an existence before Jesus in the world. And that's who he is. So he's covering all these tracks here. And then he says this, all things came into being through him, not by him, through him. So, in other words, John is saying that the creation of the cosmos itself was a sort of cooperative act. God the Father is doing it, but for some reason he does it through the Son. So the Son is there at the beginning of time itself. And is an active participant in the creation. So what is interesting here too is the word cosmos. And this is another one of John's tricks. There's about 4 different uses for the word cosmos. Like we do with the word world. I've got a world of trouble, the world stuff. What in the world are you doing? Listen to all those different uses of the word world, you know. The world is made up of such and such, chemical matters. There's at least 4. We can think of other uses. Um, the word cosmos has a bit like that. It can mean the universe at large, the whole universe. So you can, and we just simply use the word cosmos. We're taking it straight across. I think we mean that, don't we? That's the universe, the stuff of the universe. Or John also uses it in the way we use the word world. The world is going to pot. Now we're talking about people there, aren't we? That we're just so that's the same usage there in John. So you can use the word cosmos to mean the universe, mean all the people in the world, and he also less than the other writers of the New Testament. He tends to see the world as in a somewhat hostile relationship with God at times. The world is hostile to God. Now we would say the world does not understand about Jesus. And that's what John is about to say. He said, in him was life. And the life was the light of all people. The light shines in darkness, and darkness does not overcome it. And here we have something that John is accused of being. John is accused by some people of being a dualist. That he thinks of these 2 fundamental forces of light and darkness. And you do see that theme in John's Gospel. I think John might have been an Essene before. I think John the Baptist was an Essene. No. The Essenes were a group that broke away from Judaism because they believed that the Jewish people had become unfaithful to God. They weren't following God's laws. And that the calamity of Israel being a captive nation ruled by barbarians, the Lord's people in God's land, with a bunch of savages running the place and then humiliate priests and all that. So they broke away and formed these tight community groups separate from the world, a bit like the exclusive brethren, but they're not vicious. But they broke away saying that they were going to follow scrupulously all the laws of the Old Testament and live faithfully to God, and that then they might be able to purge the soul of Israel. Now, John the Baptist looks like an Essene to that.
The ones instrumented.
Yeah, it's him. Yeah, and collected the scriptures, and the most important archaeological find of the last 150 years came out of this case. That's right. Amazing.
It's amazing, everything.
You've been there?
Yeah.
It looks pretty hostile.
Well, the areas, but the buildings that they built were pretty amazing. And it wasn't just living in caves. They had a whole sort of township, or like sort of like a township.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think that John was missing?
Well, because of his lifestyle, largely, he no sex, no grog, vegetarian, sort of, and also he's an Old Testament man. He said, well, Jesus says he's the last of the great prophets. In fact, the great. Well, you just got to step up. I mean, I'm not going to go to barricades over that. It's just, I wouldn't be surprised if it was them at all, because they were the driving force, you know, but behind Orthodox Jewry at the time, really. So
They're informed.
yeah,
Or something like that.
that's right. I think you're right. I think there's a lot of connection between John and that tradition, I just think, anyway. So there was, so he was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. Now, what's it saying? I think there's a sort of cosmic dimension to this. Now, the irony is overwhelming, isn't it? This is the one who made everything, or through whom all things were made, now turns up in the world, and the world does not recognize him. Now, in a way, I think what John is saying is that the world, and I think now he's talking about the entire cosmos itself, that we believe that God is knowable through the cosmos. It's a vague notion. We've talked about this, you know, but this is what they call general revelation. That's the nature of who we are as people in the image of God. We can sense God in the sense that you can make some contact with a composer by listening to his music or her paintings or something, you know. You get this feeling that you know at least vague things. So I think this is what John is saying, is that the one who made the cosmos, who is known in the cosmos, comes into the cosmos, and the cosmos says, who are you? The irony, you know, that's overwhelming. That's the tragedy of the situation, if you like. And the whole of the book of John's Gospel is a way of explaining that and showing over and over again. Jesus does stuff which John said, well, there you are. That proves he's God, doesn't it? And the rest of the world wants to kill him. No, it's not. No, we know it's God. What do you mean he's God? And ridiculous. I mean, I don't blame him. Gosh, you know, if a guy you knew that lived in the street over there was going around healing people, saying, "Oh, I'm God." Well, he wasn't saying that. You know, everyone that knew that's what he meant. Yeah, you'd be saying, "Oh, come on, no, he's a nice bloke, you know. Let's steady on." And that got very violent very quickly. The first people who tried to kill him were his own family. And you can understand it. And that's why he spent most of his life right up in the north, away from the religious fervour of the south, where Jerusalem was. So he was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. Now that is sort of passive in a way. You could sort of say, well, it's not really the world's fault. There's something wrong with the world. And that it's not like they made a conscious effort not to know him. They just didn't know. That's the tragedy.
Isn't that what the next things you're saying in the reading?
Yes.
That you had gone away from God.
Yes.
So it's no wonder you don't recognise
Yes, that would say that. Well, they were looking forward to a great teacher coming, actually. So I mean, they were there, really. I'd see them as orthodox, really, over the top, but with the right intentions and getting very close to the truth itself. They were wiped out by the Romans, so they could see through it. So not only does he come into the world and the world doesn't know him, it says he came to what was his own, and they had a different reaction. And his own people did not accept him. Now that is now active, isn't it? The cosmos has just been done. That's the tragedy. But now when he comes into his own, and there's some debate about what that means. What's his own? Does that mean the Jews? That's a favourite translation. He's coming into the people. Yeah,
We use that word. And they still didn't know.
yeah,
Doing miracles and they
Yeah.
still didn't know.
Yeah.
There was a boy and he was preaching to the rabbis in the temple and they didn't know him. He said, "Who are you? You can't come in, he's too young." He came into his own then.
yeah, and they were astonished by his
He
teaching.
didn't like it.
No.
So it's
Wait a minute.
word only.
Well, I think it probably means to his own people, because that's when the irony and the tragedy is now most acute, because the whole purpose of the Jewish people is to produce this moment when he does turn up. That's what it's all about. Everything's been pointing towards this moment. That's the only reason all of their rituals were designed to symbolically point towards this. All their teaching, all the prophets, the agonies in the life of Israel were all over this issue. That one day the Messiah would emerge from amongst this people and lead this people and the world into salvation. So, yes, there were.
Jesus. Three people called Jesus.
Yeah, Jesus was popular. Yeah.
Well known and two
Yeah.
children.
Well, that's all.
Three famous ones.
Yeah.
One died young, I think he was about 12 or something. One said to a Roman soldier, because he'd been in a couple of battles and survived. It was a terrific program on SBS. If you go back, you'll probably find it. And one said to a Roman soldier, "You can't kill me." So the Roman soldier shot a spear through him, which I found quite hilarious. And he died, of course. And then there was that one too. Once he going to a Roman soldier saying, "You can't kill me."
Bang. Yeah. Whoops.
Jesus that we follow was the one who survived, who got through all the trials and tribulations.
Well, look, when Jesus was 6, there was a guy in Galilee. Now, don't forget, Galilee's in the north, and it's separated from the south. And there's foreign territory in between, the Samaritans. And you either have to go walk through this, or you have to go on outside of the river all the way around. You could have about a week for the journey. Well, when Jesus was 6, right, then this is after he just come back from Egypt. Spent the first 6 years of his life as a refugee. He comes back when Herod dies. He knows now that the family knows the body, so they come back to the north, and around that time there was a character called Judas the Galilean. It's not Judas Iscariot. It's Judas, the Galilean. He refuses to pay the tax, the Roman tax, because it had to be paid in Roman coins, and the Roman coins had an effigy, and the implication that Caesar was God. So to just touch that point was a blasphemous act. But you'll have no graven images, you won't handle it like that. And so he did what any self-righteous or self-respecting Jew would do. He said, "No, I'm not going to do it." And he immediately becomes a criminal. So he takes to the hills, and there were a number of guerrilla bands around at that time, always harassing and so on. And anyway, he forms this, but people rush to him, and in a mad frenzy, they they overwhelmed the Roman garrison in Galilee. For 3 months, they had freedom, and so the word is going around Israel. That this is it. The Lord's going to be with us. We can sweep the Romans out. The Romans took 3 months gathering an army from Germany and local areas, saying, "Oh, we want 500 men from here, 500 from the area," and they all gathered and just went through Galilee in the night. They crucified about 3,000 people. So when Jesus was 6, he would have seen all the crosses on the road.
Stephen on the phone, he get the idea of a saviour who could be dead as well. That was, you know what I mean?
No.
No, there's another guy. There's another guy out in the hills.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's right. And they knew something was going on. Yes. Yeah. Well, remember when Herod says, "Where's this king going to be born?" He found theologians who said, "Oh, well, it's going to be about him." And it's about the right time too. Yeah. And you notice when people went out to speak to John the Baptist, they were asking, "Are you the one?" And they knew there were about 3 prophecies. Are you Jeremiah come back to life? You know, are you the one? Blah blah. You know, are you the Messiah? He said, "No, no, no." And they said, "Well, who are you?" And he gives this elliptical sort of answer. The horse crying in the wilderness. Yeah. And in all the medieval paintings, John the Baptist is always pointing away from himself, pointing up there, or pointing to where Jesus is pointing away from himself. Okay. Yes, we're going all right here. So he was in the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or the will of the flesh or of the will of a man, but of God. Now there's another thing in John, this idea of adoption. And John means this, that he means that when we are joined with God and we throw ourselves on God's mercy, God recreates us. Right? And he means it. He means recreated. In the same way as the cosmos was created by the will of God. It came from nothing. It's creation out of nothing. The same thing happens with us. When he's saying he gives power to become children of God. We can't make ourselves children of God. And I'm going to finish on an examination of what that means by looking over at chapter 3, the conversation with Nicodemus, because Nicodemus provides an example of a character who is confronted with this idea that the act of salvation is not an act of personal growth or personal belief or personal action, duty, order, whatever. It's nothing that we can do. It's an act of God. And so we'll explain. So I'm now looking at verse 23 of the second chapter. This is after Jesus has turned the water into wine. His mum says, "We haven't got any grog." And he says, "Why are you asking me?" She says, "We haven't got any wine." And so she's pushing to do something about it, you know. And he does. 6 jars. Big jars like this. I mean, there's a lot of booze. Top of top of the shelf of grain. Damn it. Yes, he has. The hut said, look, normally this goes in the best for all peace. You bring out the side of the glass, so the bottles that don't have the labels on them. But he says, you've waited to the moment.
Oh, that's right.
When you bought the very best. So it's after that, and he had been performing miracles in Jerusalem. And listen to this verse, because you wonder what's going on here. So people were watching, and instantly he becomes famous. Like he is the talk of everybody, and he begins to overwhelm John the Baptist in terms of popularity. And there's a struggle between John the Baptist followers. I wonder, well, did we go over and follow him now? So it says this, when he was in Jerusalem during the Passover festival, many believed in his name because they saw the signs that he was doing. Fair enough. That's what he was doing. They believed him. And the Greek word is pistio, which is the word he uses if you want. You believe in me, pistio, you believe in me, this is the same word. So this has all happened. They believe in him. But Jesus, on his part, would not entrust himself to them because he knew all people and needed no one to testify about anyone. For he himself knew what was in a man. Now there was a man called Nicodemus. So what is going on? Why? What more does Jesus want? He says, if you believe in me, I will come to you and everything will be fine. And here are people saying, yes, we believe in you. And he says, go away, I don't trust you. Why? Well, it doesn't really say that. It was because of the miracles. That's why he did the miracles, to show that he was the Son of God. And when John the Baptist wanted to know, are you really the one? He does a whole bunch of miracles and so tell him about what I've just done. So that is sufficient for Jesus. That is sufficient proof. Don't tell John the Baptist, you just told me I've healed a blind man, I've made, the man is mad or whatever. So why doesn't Jesus trust them? I don't think we get an answer really, except yes.
Which is basically they just want country. They don't want
But, I'll take yeah.
and so therefore we
Yeah.
just believe if they had clear belief in
Yes, I think so.
that would be huge.
Yeah. See, what's interesting about the reading we heard in church this morning, which is the feeding of the multitude, is that notice that their response was they wanted to take him by force and make him king. Yeah. And everything changes from that moment on. Jesus never does that again. He does fewer and fewer miracles. He doesn't do the big open crowd type stuff, and he stays in the north. So everything changes. And the other thing he does from that moment on is he starts to tell his disciples exactly what's going to happen to him, and they can't think of it. And you must have. If I was there, I wouldn't have to do that. I mean, if you're the Son of God, mate, I mean, what do you mean? They're going to crucify him. What? You can
Do something.
You can crucify like he did to the fruit tree. Same.
We're going to do anything.
Yeah,
And we've just given up everything for you.
That's
so
right.
they're going to leave us.
yes, exactly.
I'm angry about that.
Yeah. I think it proves too much for Judas. But I think at the end he thought, no, it's got and something wrong, something wrong. So, and I think after that prostitute woman came in and compromised Jesus, and since after that, according to Matthew, Jesus went out into the night. And I think after he saw that, he thought, well, back to that. So, I don't know. But anyway, let's come back to this question. Why didn't Jesus trust himself to people who said they believed in him? Well, I read it in this way because I think there's an artificial chapter heading that disrupts this section, because John is indicating that Nicodemus is an example of the person that Jesus couldn't trust. And now Nicodemus is a good man. I've got a lot of time for Nicodemus. He appears 3 times in the New Testament. Here, when he seeks Jesus out to have a conversation with at night time, on his own, away from everything. I don't think he's frightened of his time doing it in secret, like, because he shows great respect to Jesus, and Jesus shows respect to him, calls him a great teacher. You're a great teacher. What are you asking me to? And Nicodemus says, we know that you've come from God. So he's a Pharisee. For him to say that, he's a good man. And later on, when things are beginning to really hot up, Nicodemus, in the middle of a meeting, a big Pharisaic meeting, he stands up for Jesus, which is a very bold thing for him to do. And then afterwards, he's seen requesting the body of Jesus to prepare for burial, and he has with him, he and another bloke, preserving environment type stuff, which will cost tens of thousands of dollars. So Nicodemus appears to have been rich. So he comes to Jesus, and this is what goes on. He says, he says, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who's come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do apart from the presence of God. Jesus says, verily I tell you, and this is a really strange answer from Jesus. Nicodemus very polite. So, come to talk to you. I want to talk. And Jesus says, unless you're born again, you will never see the kingdom of God. Funny answer. And Nicodemus is astonished. What do you mean? If I got to go into my mother's womb again? Jesus said, no, you don't understand. And then here comes the answer. He says, no one. He said, verily I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God without being born of water and spirit. What is born of the flesh is flesh, and what is born of the spirit is spirit. Do not be astonished if I say to you, you've got to be born from above. So Jesus is saying to Nicodemus, you basically can't do anything. You cannot. The thing that you're asking me is about Nicodemus is about to say, great teacher, really, what have I got to do to be saved? What's the story? And Jesus said, you can't get there. Whatever it is you're wanting to do, to know, to believe, all that sort of stuff. That is the beginning, perhaps, but it's not what actually will change you, because he says flesh can only do so much as flesh can do. Spirit is another matter. So he's saying human beings are confined within a set of limitations, which means that the actual act of salvation itself is not in their hands. They can't do it. It comes from God. And God will have to recreate us. Born again Right. Or
You're saying no.
it could be, but no, I don't think it is. I think actually the word semen is actually saying, you know, you can give birth to a physical baby, but that's as far as you can go. You can't change that, but you can't recreate that baby. That's what God does. So the act of conversion is a divine act done by God in response to the attitude of faith. So you see, when people say, "Are you born again?" quite often you get the feeling of, "Oh, I'll get myself born again. You know, I'll do it." You know. So that you know, that's an interesting. It really hits Nicodemus between the eyes. He has no idea what Jesus is saying. His whole life, perhaps, has been guided by following the precepts of the law in that search for righteousness, in the way that Muslims do. My Muslim friends do this. They live in a state of constant awareness that they don't want to be caught in a state of sinfulness, should they die. They're very troubled. But so that's up to them all the time, see? And I think a lot of Christians get that feeling that when they approach death or something, they worry, I haven't done enough, I haven't been good enough, I've slipped up, or, you know, I mean, I say that to myself all the time, but there is this confidence that
It's the same as grace.
it is right. Yeah, well said. It is. Yeah,
So you can't
yeah,
do it,
yes,
you can't.
yeah. Yeah, so look, I've enjoyed talking with you. The older I get, the more astonished I am by what it is we believe. You know? And I think if you are not astonished, and I'm now talking to myself, if you are not just almost overwhelmed by the enormity of what it is we are claiming God has done, then I suggest you don't understand what God has done. I did. I'm beginning to really understand the fact that God, the creator of the cosmos, it comes and joins us in the world, takes our form, goes through all of the troubles of being a human being, and then submits himself to that hideous death, knowing from the very beginning that that's where it's going to end up. You know. Now, so give yourself some time to be astonished. And if you're not astonished, say to God, I want to be bloody astonished. You know, because it is an astonishing thing that we believe. Quite unique in all the world religions. It's an enormous thing. And a thing that the world, I think, is desperate to hear. And I think we should have people out there, and not people captured within the church, but people out there you're really finding the words that communicate with our culture and finding within the culture the intimations of belief which are already there. I don't think our culture is hostile. I think our culture is hungry. And I can see the intimations of that search for reconciliation with God. And that's where we should start, I reckon. But I don't have too much confidence in that being able to do that. So on that very nice. Yes, now look, I've got Susan's away. She's coming back on Thursday, Friday, I think. And I'm going to write up all these notes. It'll be about 70 or 80 pages, and I'll send it around to you. I'll see if maybe someone will like to publish.